Nice smile.
All right, where to go?
Good afternoon and welcome to the Museo's online writing class. I'm Carol Latham, the Community Outreach Coordinator for the Museum and Cultural Center in Anaheim. And it is our wish that you, your family, and circle of concern are all now safe and healthy, not only now, but that you will continue to stay that way. The museum at the Museo is a cultural and community hub with the mission to engage the community in exploring and celebrating the diverse heritage and culture and arts. And we do this through creative programming, events, exhibits, and presentations like this. We appreciate you taking your time this afternoon to join us. This afternoon's presentation is with Lynette M. Smith, who is an author, professional copyright editor, and if you wish to learn the special effects of writing letters that will resonate and be appreciated by the recipient, you came to the right place. I'm sure you will have questions, so be sure to add them in the chat and we'll do our very best to get them answered. With Father's Day being just a week away, this class is very timely. And whether it's a letter that you want to write to your dad, your grandfather, stepdads, father figures, mentors, big brothers, this will be a wonderful opportunity, a very unique opportunity for you to write them a heartfelt letter today. So it is my pleasure to introduce Lynette Smith, who believes that together we can change the world, one heartfelt letter at a time. Welcome, Lynette. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Carol. It's so wonderful to be here. I love the opportunities to share how easy it really is and how personally rewarding it can be for the letter writer and the recipient to generate these wonderful, heartfelt letters of appreciation. And you may be wondering, well, what got her going on that? Well, what got me going took place in November of 2008 when our son Byron got married. At the wedding rehearsal dinner, he and his bride-to-be each brought out a beautiful framed, heartfelt letter of appreciation for their respective parents. And each one talked about what it was like growing up in the family, what qualities they most appreciated about each of their parents, and they wrapped up with what values they had learned in their family that they planned to bring to their own marriage. And I'm going to tell you, it was a wonderful experience. That was that night, that was that letter, that was the two couples and my son and now daughter-in-law Rachel. We were all so moved that when these letters were read, there wasn't a dry eye in the house. We were just, goodness. And I'm going to tell you, the fact that that letter was framed, I've put it in a place of honor in our home. And every time I read it, you know what happens? My eyes well up, my hand goes right here. And it's just as moving as the first time. That's the lasting power of a heartfelt letter of appreciation. Now today we're going to focus more on letters to father figures and so on, but I want to tell you early on, by the way, you received a set of handouts that I would like to suggest to you, if you have not already done so, that you print the second and third pages of those handouts. This is what the second page looks like. It's a handy way to take notes that will help you later. And the third page is customized to the letter you're about to write. So that will also help you a lot. You will, because I won't be asking each of the questions on this because you'll have them there. So I just wanted to mention that. Let's talk about, obviously Father's Day is coming up in a couple of weeks, and the theme today is writing a letter to the father figure. in your life, or the grandfather figure, or the mentor. Um, can some of you chime into the chat window and mention other possible father figures who might be good to honor for Father's Day with one of these heartfelt letters? I've got some ideas. Let's see if you come up with them too. Just go ahead and pop those ideas into the chat room. Those who haven't used Zoom regularly, there is at the bottom of your screen, there's a little icon that says chat. If you float your cursor over the bottom of the screen, and you can click that, and that will open up the chat window. What do you think, Carol? Is there somebody you'd like to mention?
Well, you know, I can remember growing up having really wonderful teachers that, and each of them in their own way contributed to, you know, my character and my well-being. So I think teachers might be one of the men that we might want to consider as well.
True, I like that idea. Mentors, the same way.
Mm-hmm.
We have a mentor who's someone coaches, absolutely.
Yeah.
What about big brothers? We're talking.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Big brothers and sisters. Well, big brothers, the big brother acts as your mentor and your guide, and that's kind of what a father does.
Mm-hmm.
So big brothers perform an important role in people's lives, you know, really forming values and standards of living that are good. Uncles, absolutely, uncles, and your own brothers, for that matter, if they happen
Mm-hmm.
to be a father, that would, and a good model father, this would be an ideal time to acknowledge your brother for the wonderful job he does as a dad. For that matter, your son, who happens to be a father, right? Or a nephew you're close to, that you're in a position to see that that individual is a really good father. Neighbors, this is good too. Neighbor, father figures. In reality and in books, I've seen what important roles neighbors play to the kids that are in the neighborhood. And they really do add to the well-roundedness of somebody's life growing up. So these are some really good ones. Whether they're living or deceased. Suppose that you have a father figure or a grandfather who's deceased, and you're thinking, darn, I wish I had said and told him how much he meant to me in my life and what a difference he made. And you feel, darn, it's just too late, but it truly is not. Because you can write a letter. You can read that letter aloud while you're in a special place, such as at the beach at sunset, or in the mountains next to a running stream, or in a room with a couple of candles lit. Give this a degree of ceremony while you read that letter aloud to somebody who has departed from your life. And I have a personal feeling, you know, here we are on this earth. We have souls, and those souls have shells. And death is just meaning the shell wore out. The soul lives on. My feeling is that when you're thinking with love about this departed man in your life, you're drawing his soul back and getting his attention, and he's listening while you're reading that letter. So I don't think this is a wasted effort to read a letter to someone who is deceased. I think it's rewarding for you as the person reading it, and I believe it's rewarding to the soul, and it's a connecting experience between you and that departed loved one. So absolutely, deceased individuals as well are good to remember, to acknowledge. So who do you want to acknowledge, support, or appreciate? Because here's the thing, you might say they're great, and a year from now they might remember that you said it, but that's as far as it goes. You might text it to them one day, but that's just conversation. That's even more fleeting. You might actually take the time to put your thoughts into an email, which is great as far as it goes, But the recipient reads the email, feels really good about it, and then that email gets buried with all those other emails, or the computer crashes. One of the things that happens is if you ever receive such a letter by email, print it out first thing so you've got tangible evidence in case something happens to your computer that that person wrote something nice. And it's a way too to be able to read it frequently and feel good every time it's read. So your letter is going to tell them, and if you take the trouble to either handwrite it or write it with a pen, and either is accepted, or write it with a pen, of course, or put it on the computer, but sign it with a pen, it becomes tangible. It's done also with a degree of ceremony. It's printed out on nice paper. It's presented to the individual, if you can, in person, if you can't, by mail, but with respect. And that letter becomes a very special memory to the person who's receiving it. It will be saved, and just like our son's letter to us, treasured and reread and refelt over and over again. Now that letter our son wrote us, my shell is going to wear out someday too. My soul will live on, but my shell will wear out. And so will my husband, and here this letter will remain, and my son will have it, and he'll treasure it. And when his shell wears out, he'll give that letter to his daughters, our grandchildren, and they will treasure it. This letter represents a way for our descendants to know what we were like as individuals. So that is truly a lasting memory. It's a legacy. So these letters really do serve well on multiple levels. You've doubtless said, letter writing is a lost art. Nobody does it anymore. In large extent, that's true, because they've forgotten what a neat thing it is to either write or receive a letter. People saved letters. I just read the other day about a woman who encountered letters that her grandfather had written to her grandmother when they were engaged. They were planning their wedding that was months into the future, and they were exchanging letters back and forth. And she had the letters that her grandfather had written to her grandmother. And they meant so much, and she was very careful to continue to preserve those in a special way. As a matter of fact, there's a story about that on my website, which is goodwaystowrite.com, on the page called Heartfelt Stories. It's the last story that's indicated there. And interestingly, the woman who wrote it, her name is Margot Note, N-O-T-E. And I don't think she made that up. But it's a really good letter. And she's also written a good book about archiving materials like that. And that one's on the resources page under books and videos that are helpful to people. So I wanted to mention that. Anyway.
Lynette, if I can just mention, if they're in the chat, if there's someone that would like to send a message just directed to you without everyone else seeing it, that they can do that just by changing the icon from everyone to just to you. And, you know, this is a perfect forum for anyone, 12 years old and up who wants to write a letter like what you're describing. So.
By the way, there will be about a 15-minute period later on this afternoon that will be an opportunity to start working on your first draft. But also during that time, if you want to have a conversation with me through the chat room, a private one, because you may have a very private question you don't want everyone to see, that will be an opportunity that I can key in answers privately back to you. So keep that in mind as well. So here we are. People wrote letters in the olden days. What do they do today? It's such a hurry-up world. They're multitasking. There's distractions. There's communication shortcuts like the email and the texting and I find so many emails, by the way, that are sent from my iPhone, and they consist of about 2 sentences. So sending from an iPhone, they're typically very, very brief. I don't think you'd get the depth in a letter like that you would if you were taking the time to really compose it on the computer, print it out, and present it or mail it carefully. So yes, people speak, say, gee, thanks, gee, you're great, I love you, and that's great, as long as it lasts in their memory, but it isn't very long. Tweeting is just conversation, texting is just conversation. Emailing, we talked about that. It can be lost in the thousands of emails. It can be crashed from your computer. So all of these expressions of gratitude are well intended, but they're temporary. They're forgotten. So the printed letter is much more important, much more meaningful. It's been thoughtfully composed, and it's going to be saved, remembered, and treasured, just like your relationship. So your letter can also help bring meaning to another person's life. Think of a person who does a lot of volunteering, a Little League coach, all right? And he's out there and he's coaching and he's just doing it. And yes, he loves it, but he doesn't know how many lives he's affecting by what he's doing, because people don't often think to tell him. And he goes on through life, and decades later he's saying, yeah, I was a Little League coach once. That was a lot of fun. And that's about as deep as that experience becomes. But suppose one of the people he coached wrote to him one day and said, I remember back when I was having difficulties. There was the threat of gang activity. There was this, there was that. Little League really helped me focus, and you, as my coach, really, really gave me the guidance that I needed to put me on the right path in life. So that man who was a coach receives this letter, and suddenly his hand goes to his heart, and he says, I did make a difference. I did make a difference. That's so important for me to know, that while I've been on this earth, I have made a positive difference in the life of another. It's rewarding. It's personally and heartfully rewarding. How many people go to their deathbeds wondering, did I make a difference? Did I really make a difference? Again, they might have been told quickly, briefly, and they've forgotten. Did I make a difference? Gosh, I hope I made a difference. So these letters are tangible demonstrations that these people did make a big positive difference. Maybe not in your own life, but maybe in the lives of others, such as that Little League coach. What if one of the parents wrote that letter and said, I saw how you interacted with the kids on the team, and you were just great, and you helped them. And you see, wherever that letter comes from, it's important. The individual receiving that letter is being acknowledged for making a difference, either in one life or in the lives of a lot of people. And they can feel satisfaction that they've lived their life well. That's how important these letters are. Just amazing. So here's the question. If your letter can bring that kind of special meaning to the life of another, isn't your time investment worth it? Isn't that person worth it to give them one of these special letters? You can write a life-changing letter, and I'm going to show you how. What you're going to get today during this workshop is information on how to plan and write the letter, considerations for packaging and presenting it, individual guidance for your specific letter. Again, during that 15-minute quiet time, I'll be happy to respond to you individually, or if your question is not a private one and might have relevance to others, go ahead and ask it in a public way and I can answer it publicly. So keep that in mind. You're going to get today a solid start on your first draft of your letter. So I'll be answering your questions individually just before and just after that draft writing period. There may be one or two during the time, if I'm not busy responding to someone else privately, that I can also answer publicly during that 15-minute period. But mostly I'm going to try to get the questions answered either before or after the writing period. Now, I'd like to say to you that having the right words to describe this special someone is really important. One moment. There's that book. Excuse me. This is the book I wrote. It's How to Write Heartfelt Letters to Treasure for Special Occasions and Occasions Made Special. And aside from the fact that it's got at the beginning general advice, no matter what kind of a letter you're going to write, it then breaks out into chapters for the types of letter you're going to write, whether it's for a retirement or a birthday or a quinceañera. But in the back, the appendix has so many good tools. And one of those really good tools are these word lists. You can see there are 15 of these lists for different demographics, like an older woman or a younger man or someone religious or spiritual, and so on. And these words can be really helpful when you're trying to compose the letter you're going to write. You can go through and just jot down the words that seem to apply to the person you're writing to. And then out of all the words that you think apply, pick 3 or 4 or 2 or 3 that you think are really helpful and that you'd like to write about. And those are the ones you can focus on in your letter. One of the things, there's a lot, as far as a Father's Day thing, we've got also a military service member is one of those demographic lists, by the way. And you may know a dad who's in the military, so that's something helpful as well. What I've done today is to combine the younger man, the middle-aged man, and the older man list together, and then split that and culled it down into the 100 of what I consider the best words of those that might be most appropriate for a Father's Day themed letter. If you've got a scratch paper or some way of taking notes, I've split them out into different themes, and I'm just going to read them slowly to you, and you jot down the ones that you think are going to be the most relevant to the letter you're going to write. Under temperament, adaptable, authentic, easygoing, resilient, spontaneous, adventurous, curious, enthusiastic, conscientious, self-confident, caring, inspiring, warm-hearted, fun-loving, quirky, level-headed, honest, unbiased, idealistic, independent, optimistic. Now, under the theme of creativity, intelligence, and cleverness, here come some words. Accomplished, ambitious, prolific, adept, hardworking, practical, self-taught, analytical, clever, intelligent, knowledgeable, logical, artistic, musical, poetic, creative, imaginative, perceptive, capable, efficient, meticulous, organized, innovative, resourceful, talented, versatile. Under family interactions and loyalty, how about these words? Courageous, protective, vigilant, devoted, reliable, self-sacrificing, affectionate, gentle, indulgent, kind-hearted, patient, forgiving, insightful, objective, understanding, guiding, reasonable, reassuring, supportive. to communication and attitudes with others. Accessible, attentive, thoughtful, trustworthy. Generous, hospitable, kind, philosophical. Sorry, I thought I had the ringer off. Cheerful, engaging, motivational, persuasive, witty. Considerate, encouraging. Chivalrous, gentlemanly, patriotic. Good-natured, sociable. Cooperative, diplomatic, genuine, open-minded, tolerant. Here are some overall qualities to wrap it up. Admirable, ageless, lovable, playful, here's a fun one, salty, unforgettable, well-liked, wise, and youthful. So there are some words to have you keep in mind. And if you'll pardon me for just a moment, I'm going to make sure this doesn't interrupt us again. It'll make a little noise. There, it's off. Anyhow, let's see what's next. There was one of your handouts you may have noticed that includes just 5 little sample words in each of several demographic lists. That was just to give you a flavor of what you would find in the book, if you have the book, which, by the way, I think is pretty good. As a matter of fact, How to Write Heartfelt Letters to Treasure shows you how to write 157 different types of heartfelt letters of appreciation. So that's a pretty comprehensive book. It's a good one to keep on your desk and handy, because you may find after you write this one letter, it felt good to write it. It felt good to give it. It felt good to see how your receiver enjoyed it. And you'll want to do it again. I personally think it'll become a habit, and it's a very good habit to have. So keep in mind and refer to the second page here right now as we're talking. Who do you appreciate? This is sort of ways for you to take notes today, not only in general, but specifically for the letter you're planning to write. So write somebody's name in there that you're planning to focus your letter writing efforts on. And let me tell you about the general components of a letter of appreciation, because it's really not so intimidating at all. You can start your letter by relating some kind of a shared, treasured memory for the both of you. I remember back when I was a little kid, and that one day when I really messed up and got in trouble and so forth, here's how you handled it. And it meant so much to me that you were being fair and non-judgmental, whatever. You're relating that memory. And it's a way of saying, oh yeah, I remember that. I mean, personally, well, I'm going to share anyway. There was a day where my little brother got in trouble for something that little goody two-shoes here, it was actually my fault. And I never told my parents when he got in trouble. I just kept my mouth shut, and he got a spanking. And I have felt guilty about that ever since. Oh, how guilty. I finally did apologize to him about 10 years ago. And I said, I'm so sorry. Anyway, so I don't know if that was a treasured memory, but it was certainly a strong memory for me. And my brother may or may not have recalled when he took that spanking that should have been mine. But something where you, anyway, a shared treasured memory, that's your first paragraph in the letter. Your second paragraph talks about the qualities you most admire about the person you're writing to. And you can give examples. You don't have to list a long list, like I say, 2 or 3. And maybe with examples of how you saw those traits in action. That would be your middle paragraph, maybe another paragraph as well. And let's talk about letter length just for a moment and digress about that. I think your first draft ought to be as long as you feel you want to make it to say everything you want to say. but we're going to be talking in a minute about how you're going to present it and in what form it's going to take. Our son's letter could only be one page, and it had to fit in a frame. So a first draft is just that. It's a first draft. You can pare it down later to the things that you want to have most important expressed in this letter. So again, a couple of paragraphs, perhaps more, about the positive traits. I remember I wrote a letter to my high school art teacher many years after he retired, and I brought it over to him where he was in assisted living down in San Diego County, and I presented it. That letter, I had so much to say. It ended up being 6 pages long. But a lot of that was about relating the memories and so on. And, you know, no time, I tell you one of them, but no time. Anyway, it was very well received, and it felt really good to give that to him in person while he was still alive. He died 3 years later. And I know he read and reread that letter because, again, it helped him feel acknowledged as a teacher, that he made a difference in his students' lives. So that middle section of your letter is about the positive traits you most admire. The next and final paragraph is going to talk about what kind of a difference that person has made either in your life or in the lives of others. And that's a very personal thing for you to say. But that's the crux of the matter. The person who's reading is going to laugh at the shared treasured memory. They're going to go, wow, I'm glad they noticed I have these qualities. And they'll go, I did make a difference. That's what that last paragraph is about, to show they made a difference. And after that, all that's really left is to say thank you and love, or with sincere appreciation, depending who you're writing to, and sign your name by hand. Now, some of you are comfortable with the computer keyboard, and maybe that you are keyboarding at such a speed it can keep up with your thoughts. I'm one of those people myself. I'm a copy editor. I can do this. So I do my thinking and composing on the computer. Other people want to go find a quiet place and a lined ruled tablet and just jot down some thoughts and start composing in that way. And that's fine. There are no rules about this. Compose in any way that makes you feel most comfortable. And if you're planning to end up with a handwritten letter, you don't necessarily have to compose all your drafts with a pen. You can do this on the computer too, and I'm going to make a true confession. Even when I'm writing thank you notes, I'm composing what I want to say on the computer because I'm too spontaneous otherwise in what I write. No, I didn't want that word, cross it out and write the next word. I don't want it to be cruddy looking when it's finished. So I compose on the computer, and when I'm finished, I grab my pen and I start writing. And that's where my thoughts are saying exactly what I wanted them to say because I worked hard at getting that across. So compose any way you're comfortable. If you decide to print out your letter on the computer, remember to sign it by hand. That's still okay. And let's talk for a minute about who you're writing to, and especially if you are, well, let's look at two things. If you're handwriting it, consider, is the person you're writing to comfortable reading cursive writing? And if not, print it. If you are composing and printing on the computer, and the person who's going to receive that letter has a vision problem, use larger print. And use maybe a little wider line spacing to make it easy for that person to read across the line. So write and print or handwrite with your recipient in mind. So planning is part of this process too. If you're going to have a handwritten letter, you can have as many pages as you want. If you're going to have a planning to frame your letter, I recommend that it be typewritten rather than handwritten. Number one, it's more legible to multiple readers if it's shared. And number two, it's you can fit more on one page. And you should shop for your frame and possibly your mat board before you start planning your letter, because these things will determine your margins and your letter length and how much you can comfortably fit without having it look too crowded. So that's part of your planning ahead of time. You may be planning to mail the letter, and that's fine. Then not framed. Then you may want to get a certificate holder that holds that letter. Or you may just want to print it on nice paper and put it inside a 9x12 envelope with maybe, especially if it's going to be mailed, there are additional precautions to make. You can get a piece of chipboard, the same size as your stationery, and then wrap that in lightweight plastic and tape it shut so it stays rigid and won't fold. Put it in the envelope to mail it and mark it, please do not bin, which by the way means they might nick you a little bit more for postage, but check USPS.com. It won't be much more. And that way your letter is going to arrive safely. If you're putting it in one of those certificate holders, you'll need a slightly larger envelope, like 10x13, to hold a certificate holder. So these are things to do when you're planning ahead. Now, what about while you're writing? You're going to want to spend quality time in a quiet environment. I remember when I was first writing and composing anything that was going to be for publication decades ago, I would write and I'd get all knotted up in my own writing and just big words and funny phrases and overlong sentences. And finally, somebody gave me a really good piece of advice one day, and they said, pretend the person you're writing to is sitting across the table from you, and you're just talking. Write the way you would speak. It's a great way to get your first draft written. Just put it down as if you're speaking to the person. And remember too, it's a first draft. You can fix it and clean it up later, but at least it gets your thoughts out there in a comfortable way. So that's a really good thing to do. So find a quiet environment and imagine you're speaking to the person and you're just heart to heart telling you how you feel. So you'll write naturally that way, and that will help you. Later on with your next draft, whatever, you can make it flow logically, although I've given you the basic outline, the shared treasured memory, the admirable qualities, and the difference the person has made. So that's what you can do. You can add an optional theme to your writing if you want to. Our son's letter talked a little bit in the shared treasured memory about road trips that we took as a family to different places and how much that meant to him and how much he enjoyed those. And then he talked about the admirable traits. And when he got to the part about making a difference in the values he was going to bring to his own marriage, he had some kind of a wrap up. I wonder if I wrote that here. Yeah, there are far too many experiences in our lives to share in this short letter. I will always be grateful for the experience I've had with such wonderful parents. I've tried to highlight a few things I have learned. I will continue to try to be a good person and now a good husband. One chapter of my life now comes to an end, and I will now embark on the next leg of our journey with my wife, Rachel, riding shotgun. So he brought the idea of journey and travel and road trips as his theme into this letter, and it was just really kind of cute. So you can do that if you want to. There's no law that says you have to. During your writing, here's what's important. Be thoughtful, positive. Don't let any negatives get into this letter. It's about positives in this letter. Be supportive and be grateful. And then once you have your first draft, rewrite as needed until you're happy. I'll go one step further. Some of you may be a little self-conscious about what you write, and oh my gosh, I'm not a very good speller, and I don't know very good grammar, and I don't know how to punctuate, and I'd be afraid to give this to him. Well, do you have a very good friend who does know something about spelling, grammar, and punctuation, who won't rip your letter apart, but who will take care of the embarrassing errors so that in one of your drafts, so that you can have a better final draft? You can do that. If it's a very, very personal letter that should not be seen by anyone else's eyes, just do your best. If you're composing on the computer, and let's say you're using Microsoft Word, pay attention to those squiggly lines that appear underneath some of the words and check your spelling. Check if it thinks there's a grammar problem. Look closely at that sentence and see if you can identify what it is. So just make your best effort. But day to day, I recommend that you have a good friend or relative take a look at your letter who knows something about spelling, grammar, and punctuation. And go on like that so that it'll be your best effort. Talking about how to present your letter, here's something to keep in mind. Let's suppose that you're writing to your nephew to commemorate Father's Day because he's a really good father. Suppose your nephew has a brother, another nephew, who's a medium-rate father. It would not be appropriate to write only to the nephew who's a great father and not write to the other nephew, his brother, because it's going to look like favoritism and the other person is going to feel diminished. You want to put forth equal treatment. Say different things, find good qualities about the lesser good father-nephew, but write them down, because what you want is each of these letters to be sincere and positive and from your heart. You can find good things to say about anyone. So watch for that equal treatment. You know, I'm going to backtrack a minute. Remember at the beginning we were talking about the types of people who might receive the letter, and uncles and so on and so forth. There's something. What's that thing that is just flies out of your mind just as soon as it flew in? I was going to add one more to that, and I don't know who it was. So I'm sorry. We'll have to move on. Just got to laugh at yourself at times like that. So equal treatment in terms of who you're writing to. How to present the letter. Special meal versus gathering versus something just private one-on-one. Is it going to be read aloud or not? Is it going to be displayed? These are things that you want to plan ahead of time before you get rolling in there. And then on your handout, number 5 is Enhance It, where it talks about enhancing the experience of presenting this letter. Let's suppose you're writing to a military service member who is a model father, and you can't be there in person to write that letter, to present the letter. You can give a recording. You can record yourself reading it aloud, and you can tell this wonderful dad that that letter will be saved for him the next time he's on leave. That's just an example of what you can do. If you're going to present the letter in person or enclose something with it, some people like to make a little collage of memories and photos, and you could put that with the letter too. So use your imagination with regard to the types of things you might do to enhance the experience. One of the things, remember those positive words with the word list? One of the things I did for my father-in-law was to create a list one time for his birthday. Who says you're indescribable? Then I used multicolors and lots of words to describe him and why I thought he was a neat person. So that's another creative touch you can do. So what do you think? Shall we get started writing? Remember, it's going to be a rewarding experience for the giver and the receiver. When you dedicate time to express your thoughts in a tangible, permanent way, because you're going to feel more grateful, and that's a wonderful state of being, and your letter's recipient will feel grateful and appreciated every time that letter is read. So if you've got gratitude, now is the time to get writing. So your third page on the handout is where you can customize the notes you want to take for yourself for this specific letter and start writing a first draft for the next 15 minutes or so. And before we start writing, let's see what letters have come up. What if you have bad writing? Letters, questions. If you have bad writing or bad penmanship, either take care to make it better or print it on the computer and write your name as legibly and neatly as you can. Now, writing to someone who has been deceased, again, is it a very personal one-to-one letter, or is it something that you won't mind afterwards giving that letter to that person's children, spouse, grandchildren, or whoever would be appropriate? You can do it though, and you should write that letter and present it in a way that maybe by the graveside, maybe in a room with a couple of candles lit, maybe at a mountain stream, maybe at the beach at sunset, read it aloud. Now, what if it's one of those really private letters that you don't want another soul in the world to ever encounter? Well, you've got ways to destroy the letter. You can bury it where nobody will find it. You can shred it up in small pieces. If you're by that mountain stream, don't tell anybody, but you can send them downstream, those pieces. You can do the same thing with the ocean. You can throw them into the ocean. Or you can put it away somewhere else where you might like to read it again someday, but you're confident no one else will find it. So that's if it's a very, very personal letter you would want to do. So let's see, Artie Agarwal says, basic writing skills are almost getting lost. A cumulative attempt must be introduced in schools and on public platforms such as these. Such interactions are very helpful. And indeed, that's why I offer these free workshops. If any of you want me, if we're at all local and you can bring at least 8 to 20 people together, I'll be happy to come out and give this workshop to you in person after we're all done wearing our masks, or online if you're willing to host it with a Zoom session like this one. Either way, happy to do it. And yes, I think in school it is important to get people to do projects like this instead of just pasting together a collage for Father's Day or Mother's Day. Trying to get your thoughts in writing is really important. And I think that can start as early as the 4th grade. It's a very good thing because letter writing is important. It is important to be able to find this method of communication that is tangible and heartfelt. So now let's go ahead and spend, I don't see other questions at this time. Do any of you have any? All right. If anyone comes up with questions, go ahead and put them in the chat box. And once again, if it's something that you want for my eyes only, this is the opportunity where I can respond to your eyes only, for your eyes only. If there's a very highly personal question, if you have a rather public one, you don't mind the answer would be public, then that's, you can just say to everyone, or, that would be a way of doing that. So we'll just go ahead for 10 or 15 minutes and give you a chance to write. Thank you. I'd like to mention that some of you may be more inclined to do poetry than writing a letter. And I think if you can do that and convey your thoughts through poetry, that also is fine. you want to start wrapping up your thoughts in another minute or two, we'll go ahead. All right, let's wrap up. A couple of questions came up. One of them has to do with, can you use quotes in a letter? You know, inspirational quotations, and the answer is yes. Now, most of these are old enough that you don't have to write for special permission, but I'd like to draw your attention to the fact that in my book, there's an entire section in the appendix about quotes you might want to use for your letter, either at the top or at the bottom. I'll just pick one at random. Parenthood is a partnership with God. You are working with the creator of the universe in shaping human character and determining destiny. That's attributed to Ruth Vaughn. Or here's another one. You are the bows from which your children, as living arrows, are sent forth. That's Khalil Gibran. So we have different themed things. That's under the category of children, parents, and grandparents. How nice I opened it just to that one with Father's Day. So yes, quotes are good. In a private letter such as this, it can even be music lyrics, but you can never use music lyrics in anything publicly published without getting special permission and probably paying a hefty fee. So mentioning that, but just in a private letter, it's fine. Then the other question that came up was photos and whether you might use photos in a letter. And I think that's a wonderful idea. If you're doing a framed letter, having a photo of you and the person you're writing to would be a great one to tuck in and then wrap the text around it. If you're framing it, as I say. If you don't have a limit as to the letter length, you could put several photos in there, or again, have a photo collage to insert with it. Wouldn't that be fun if you had a certificate that opened like this, and on one half you had the letter, and on the other half you had a photo collage? I think that would be very cool. So lots of good ideas you can use with photos. Now, what can you, oh gosh, here's something rather important about planning ahead. The type of paper or card to use, well, these are about letters. I don't think letters fit in cards very well. There's nothing wrong with thank you notes, but that's a different application. With regard to letters, you're going to be printing on probably plain paper unless you happen to know where you can get nice stationery. Here's what I would recommend. At the places like FedEx office and the UPS store and so on, they have nice resume weight paper and nice textures. You could write your letter on plain paper and then take it over there and have them create a laser copy onto the nice stationery. Because otherwise, what you're going to be probably stuck doing is buying a box or a package of 500 sheets of Arctic white linen paper, 70 pound or 24 pound, and it's going to cost you nearly $50. It can be kind of hefty, and I think the idea of photocopying this onto the nice paper is a better idea. And if what you have as your printer at home is an inkjet printer, there's another consideration, and that is that ink can get runny. If you have water damage or high humidity, the ink may begin to blur or run, and that has ruined the letter. So I think it's all fine and well to have your first printout be on plain paper, but then have a color laser copy made onto nice paper. And now let's talk about when you're going to mail a letter. Suppose you're going to fold it up. There's more than one meaning to the word ghosting. And the kind I'm going to talk about here is what happens when you take a letter and you fold it in thirds and you put it in an envelope, what you've got here inside is a writing or a printed surface and a printed surface with the laser, the toner on there. In the mail, the post office runs it through their very high temperature sorting equipment, and what happens is the image of the laser printing transfers itself a little bit onto this piece of paper that it is against. So taking that same idea again, you can either put a blank piece of paper in there and then fold the whole thing so that it won't print onto itself, or you can print right side out, which means the only ghosting that's going to happen is this portion onto the blank back side. So that's two ways to prevent ghosting on your letter. That's very important. So laser printing will, through that high speed, high temperature equipment at the post office that reads the addresses and processes the mail, careful of that. You don't want ghosting in the mail. So we are getting ready to wrap up. Let's see if there are other questions. Someone asked about calligraphy. I think that's a beautiful idea. It kind of limits how much you can say unless you're not limited to how many pages you want to do. I think calligraphy is very readable, but again, like anything else, keep your reader in mind. If you don't think that reader is going to be able to read the calligraphy well, then it might not be the best medium to communicate your thought. Or maybe calligraphy would have its place with some enlarged word or portion or something in your letter as a design element, and then you could be having regular printing going around it. That would be a possibility too. Does anyone else have any additional questions before I remind you about some resources that are available to you? Nothing coming in. All right. Well, I want to remind you, this is a great book. And it's not just because I wrote it. It's because it'll show you how to write 157 different types of letters of appreciation, where you just read a few pages at the beginning, pop over to the chapter on the type of letter you want to write, use the tools at the back in the appendix, because you have not only those word lists and not only those quotes, but you also have, just in case, great beginnings to jumpstart your sentences, organized by theme. This is not meant to be a fill in the blanks, but it's a jumpstart. I always treasured the times when you and I would, and then you continue. I hope whatever has come between us can be mended. I miss you greatly and would like to have you in my life once again because. Oh, interesting that I mentioned that one, because there is a final chapter in the book called Mending a Torn Relationship. And this doesn't come with guarantees that this relationship will be mended, but it's, in my thinking, the best possible way to try to mend that relationship, whether it's asking forgiveness or granting forgiveness. When you're writing a letter like that, don't ever go up to their front door and present it, because they may slam the door in your face. It's better to put it in the mail and let them read it in private, and then see how the chips fall and hope for the best. Yes, business appreciation letters. Some of those types are writing to a supervisor or an employee, writing to a stellar service provider or someone who created a fantastic product that you just love using. Those are the types of letters of appreciation you can write in a business environment. And just imagine if you have a supervisor right now, the supervisor, writes the reviews and writes the letters of, yeah, you did a good job on that project and so on. The supervisor never gets a good letter. Nobody ever writes to the supervisor and says, God, I love the way you work with us as a team and help us get all this accomplished. And you've really got creative ideas, and I'm so grateful you're my boss. Do they ever get letters like that? No. Would they love to? Yes. And when they get such a letter, that's the kind to make sure that you also give to human resources to put in their folder. because that should become a part of the documentation of the good job that employee is performing for the company. So yes, absolutely, business letters. There are also, today is about letters of appreciation, but there are also good ways to write bad news, and I'm just going to touch on it briefly. It's called the sandwich technique. 3 paragraphs when you're unhappy about something in a business environment. You say, this is the sandwich, that's the bread. You start with saying something nice about the company, about the individual, whatever. Then in between here, the meat of the letter is the problem you've experienced. And then also it talks about what would be your choice of a desired outcome to solve the problem or to rectify the situation. And then you end with the other piece of bread, something else nice. That's good ways to write bad news. So you've got that as well. I would like to encourage you to visit goodwaystowrite.com. You'll see resources there to help you with your letters. You'll see heartfelt stories to find out what it meant to other people who wrote and gave letters or received a letter. Very inspirational. And lots of other good tools there as well. Yes, you can even order my book there. It is also available on Amazon, How to Write Heartfelt Letters to Treasure for Special Occasions and Occasions Made Special. It's also available as an ebook on a Kindle or as an EPUB book at Barnes & Noble. So I think that is just about all I have for us. Now, that's about all I have to say about that. Thank you very much for having me today.
Well, this has been really, really fantastic. And I know that for myself, being able to write a letter to my dad, who is deceased, and other male figures that I have looked up to, have been mentors to me, that this is a really wonderful way of doing it. So thank you so much. I want to just remind everyone who's watching that your website link to Lynette's is Lynette at goodwaystowrite.com. And it will also be on the Museo's website, which is Museo, www.museo.org. There will be a follow-up evaluation sent. So do let us know your thoughts on how this program worked for you so that we can continue to give you and bring you relevant programs to the community, especially during these times that are so uncertain. There is also an opportunity for you to support the Museo. There's a donate to the Museo button on the website, and you can support us through Facebook, the website, or Instagram. And as always, your generosity is so appreciated. Special thank you to Berkenda Cantlow for her work behind the scenes. We couldn't do this without her, and without a doubt to you, Lynette. Thank you so much for helping us to navigate the nuances of writing these special letters. And special thank you to our audience who have taken the time this afternoon to check in and find out how we can write heartfelt letters to the men who support us and love us. And stay safe, stay well, stay healthy. Until next time, thank you so much.